Hi everyone, John here from LookSmart Home Inspections right here in New Jersey. Why are permits important? And what is a permit anyway? Well, say you're going to renovate a home. You want to add a bathroom or maybe finish a basement. You want to install a new electrical panel box, or you want to, change out your water heater or your HVAC system. You need a permit to do that. So you would go down to the local municipal building department of your town or municipality. You would fill out some paperwork and you would pay a permit fee. You would have your contractor do the work. And then subsequently, after the contractor has done the work, once or twice, the town municipal inspector, whether that be electrical or plumbing or just the construction code official, would come back to examine or evaluate the work that your contractor performed to make sure that it's been done up to local standards, and also it meets all the requirements for local codes and municipal codes and your state codes, right? Because the thing about it is that if you buy a house and say it has a finished basement, or say they had an addition or put on a deck, and you didn't have a permit, the permit gives you another layer of protection. I mean, as a home inspector, we're certainly going to be evaluating these things. And for certain, if there's a new deck on a house, we would be able to evaluate that deck. No issue there. But take, for example, if you had a finished basement and, the person who you're buying the house from finished this basement. As home inspectors, we can't see behind those walls. We don't know how that electrical wiring is run. We don't know how, take for example, those hi-hats in the ceiling, have been installed. But when you have the permit for that work, it gives you a little bit more protection, knowing that before those finishes went up, the electrical inspector took a look at that work, or the plumbing official took a look at that work before, the bathroom finishes were installed. So definitely permits are really, really important out there. And I know myself and other home inspectors, we actually want you to make sure that you cover your bases when you buy a house by getting the permits, right? So if the seller, say, took out a wall to open up the concept in the first floor, so they took out a wall, I mean, that's a structural modification. It requires an open construction permit and then a closed construction permit, because you want to make sure that before the finishes went up, that was evaluated. It's not a catch-all, and it's not 100%, because I've done plenty of home inspections where permits were given and then, I find things on top of that, and, I'm surprised that the permits were given. But still, it gives you an extra measure of protection. So if you're buying a home, by all means, make sure that if they have new upgrades or modifications or new electrical or plumbing work, for sure, make sure you get those closed permits. It's just an extra measure of protection, and it's a great idea. Here's the thing about permits too. Agents and attorneys, they'll have you get an OPRA, which is an Open Public Records Act. It means that you have access to any public or government records as a buyer of a home, because those records are in the public domain. And it's important, and I 100% want you to do an OPRA request to the municipality in which you are buying the home. I think that's super important. And what it will show is the permits that were opened and the permits that were closed. But here's the thing. I don't want you to rely solely on that information. Why? Because that doesn't mean that all the permits were open in the first place. So if you have a deck on the home and you buy a house and the seller put a new deck on the home, or removed the wall, or upgraded the electrical, or installed the bathroom without the permits, that's not necessarily going to say that on the OPRA. What the OPRA is going to say is that, hey, these are the permits that somebody actually physically applied for, and here are the permits that we actually closed out. And if there's any open permits in that list, right? So any open permits, obviously, you as a buyer of a house want to have closed, okay, for sure, 100%. The issue comes in is when the things are not on the OPRA. So this is why it's important as a buyer of a home and your home inspector to keep keep your eyes open for different things that you can really see if those things are on your OPRA. So especially like a finished basement or an addition or a wall removed, something like that where modifications or improvements were done. And you want to make sure that the municipal inspectors came in to evaluate those. Of course, like we said before the finishes go up, right? Because as a home inspector, I can only see what I can see. I can't see behind those walls. Although we try to do the best job we can at giving you important information. But we need to make sure that those permits were opened and closed. And another thing is that if those permits were opened and not or not gotten in to begin with, and say there's a finished basement and you go by that house, right? And then, towns do reassess taxes. So they're going to send a tax assessor over to the home to tour the house and to make sure what's exactly on the tax record is reflected in those taxes. But if you have a new deck on the home without permits, if you have a new bathroom or finished basement, no permits, guess what? You're going to have a higher tax bill, a higher tax rate. And that's important to know that before you buy a house, because frankly, these houses are crazy expensive today in New Jersey. They're nuts. I can't believe what the prices are, and they're just going to get higher. They're not coming down. So you need to really have a measure of protection by asking the right questions as far as permits, doing your OPRA, have a home inspector who's going to go to bat for you and understand that, hey, this basement was recently finished. There should be a closed electrical permit or construction permit for this finished basement. Or, yeah, this kitchen was totally renovated and it looks like we have new sink and electrical and hi-hats and all kinds of different things in this kitchen, right? We went from an average kitchen to a high-end kitchen. Rest assured that there was some plumbing modifications and some electrical modifications or additions that were installed in that newer kitchen. And without a permit, number one, you don't know if it was done correctly because we can't see behind the walls. And number two, we don't know if that's reflected in the tax record. And that's super important to know that these things are in the tax record and that they have been, properly accounted for and inspected by the municipal authorities. It's just an extra measure of protection. So make sure you guys do your due diligence, regarding permits, and ask your home inspector what he or she thinks regarding, what permits were needed, what permits weren't. Just not everything needs a permit. Take, for example, if you're just, say, replacing your kitchen cabinetry, right? That's just replacing an item in the kitchen. That doesn't necessarily need a permit, If you're, repaving, if you're adding something small to the home, if you're just replacing some light fixtures with other more modern light fixtures, that doesn't generally need a permit. But if you're doing, major plumbing, anything electrical, anything structural modification wise, that seller is going to need a permit. So make sure you look for those. Super important. One of the important aspects of a home inspection is to determine if the attic ventilation is adequate. And many times the attic ventilation is inadequate, especially in an older home. So here we have soffits on the outside of the house. So there is ventilation on our lowest area of the roof under the eave or the soffits, called soffit vents. But you have this insulation that's tucked in tight right above those soffit vents, so air is not going to be able to get in here at all. So this is something that's important. We want open soffits if the house is equipped with soffit ventilation. So air is going to come into the soffits and then exit at the top of this roof, which should have a ridge vent. So we want soffit vents coupled with a ridge vent, and that would really greatly improve the attic ventilation in the attic. It is so hot up here. We do have these gable vents, which are okay. I mean, look, that's going to be okay. We have another gable vent down the line here. But we really want to improve the ventilation so you can actually store something in this attic. So the roof covering doesn't prematurely age. You want to get, less, about roughly 5 to 6 years lower life expectancy on a roof covering than have it this hot, in your attic space. So attic ventilation is crucially important. And if we look up here, we don't have any ridge venting, so there's no top of the attic ventilation either. And so that's why air is so stagnant in this attic space. So we're going to recommend to the client who's down below, actually, he's working with a contractor downstairs today, to make some renovations of this house. However, we need to improve the ventilation by the installation of soffit vents coupled with the installation of a properly configured ridge vent here. And that would greatly improve the attic ventilation. Now, there's going to be some talk back about whether we need these gable vents. You know what? I like gable vents. I think they're helpful. I think they're useful. So I'm going to just say leave them in place. There might be some pushback by some of you guys regarding these gable vents, but you know what? To my opinion, the more ventilation we have in the attic, the better we're going to be, and the longer life we're going to have out of our roof covering. So attic ventilation, super, super important. Home inspectors, we have to look at these these plumbing pipe penetrations where they exit the roof. Here you can see daylight, and that's just not the daylight coming through the pipe because of the sunlight. That's actually daylight around the pipe where it exits the roof. And we want to make sure that there's no issues here. So this generally has to do with a boot flashing that's deteriorated on the outside of this house. So generally that's a rubber boot flashing, and that's going to get brittle over the seasons, the hot and the cold cycles. And we want this piping nice and tight. But if you see here around this piping, you see the water staining around the pipe. So this one is not going to be watertight. So these are really important aspects where the waste pipes, where the ventilation pipes actually exit the roof for the plumbing system, as well as any other pipe penetrations or chimneys that penetrate the roof. This is super important, and a lot of times we'll see water staining just like this. So look for this if you're thinking about buying a home. Look for that daylight. Why do we have daylight? Because we have a failing flashing. There should be no daylight right there. Okay, garage foundation wall. We have negative grade on the front of this house that's directing water, and that water is seeping through. We have a dry lock sealer on the walls, right? Dry lock, it's touted as, a good thing. I don't particularly like dry lock because it does two things. One, it actually locks in the water inside the block so it can't penetrate through. And it's never 100%, so you still have some seepage. And the dry lock acts as a food source for this mold right through here, right? So this is mold, and it's probably a mold called cladosporium. And that mold loves this dry lock. It loves to eat the paint. So now we have perfect conditions. We have moisture, and then we have a food source. So this mold is just going to continue to get worse and worse over time. And if you have a mold remediation company come in, they can remove this. Absolutely, they'll make this wall look all pretty. However, if you don't solve the moisture penetration problem, that is just a stopgap. It's just it's just like a Band-Aid. And this is going to come back again. So you got to be careful with mold. It can be hazardous. Those of us with good immune systems, you're likely to be okay. But compromised people, older folks, younger children, this is nasty. You don't want this in a house that you're thinking about buying. You don't want to move in first. You want this problem solved and the root cause of the problem solved for sure. We shouldn't have any holes in a fire-rated ceiling. So if you have a garage like this and there's living space above it, so here above this garage is a living room, and then we have these open holes. I guess what happened was that they were installing these garage door openers and they cut open these holes here and then back here, In the back of the garage, they were probably fixing a plumbing issue. Great, I like that. Fix it, of course. But these holes should be properly fire rated with drywall, right? Tape and then, spackle, tape first and then spackle twice, right? Because we want this to be properly fire rated, right? If a garage fire were to establish itself, we don't want it to have a quick chase right up to the living room. So fire rating of garage ceiling where there's living space above is a must do. And this is not a big deal. But don't neglect these things. It's for safety for sure. Although we see this type of deck rail all the time, it's not a graspable handrail. You can't really grasp that rail and walk safely if you're an older person, a younger person, up a set of deck steps. So we recommend an interior graspable handrail here. Some of the municipalities are going to also call this out and make this seller actually put a graspable rail on this deck. But these are just too wide. I see these all the time, and they just don't conform to modern standards because you can't put your whole hand around that rail. So that'll have to be repaired. I mean, obviously, an addition will have to be made for an interior handrail. Here we have open riser backs, and we don't really want open riser backs because a child can go through, right? That's more than 4 inches in height, and a child can go through. Also, an adult can actually trip up this set of steps and have an injury. So this is a tripping hazard. We want to see backs to those risers so we don't have any tripping hazards. So deck safety, very important. These deck rails here are unsafe. So part of our job as a home inspector is to obviously check deck guardrails for safety. So a deck guardrail should support a point load of 200 pounds on its top rail. So I like to give this a good shakeroo. And what happens here is I could almost just push that over with light pressure. And we're high. I mean, we're a story up for sure. I mean, that would smart if somebody would, go over the side of the deck. So this is something that's very important. So don't be afraid to put a little pressure. If you're buying a house, put a little pressure on your deck rails. See if they're nice and sturdy and taut. They should be really strong. So, when you have that housewarming party, that nobody gets injured. So this is definitely going to need correction. As home inspectors, one of the things that we really need to look at is the roof covering, because roofs are expensive and everybody who buys a house wants to know the age and how many years left we have in a roof. And I gotta be honest, this roof doesn't really have much time, if any, left. You can see this damage here. This roof is very, very brittle. Comes right apart. Look at that. And we have all these little surface cracks right through here. So our asphalt mat is getting very dried out and brittle. So we're really close to be needing a roof. You can see how thin that material is. And another thing you can do is just kind of rub some of that material off. It shouldn't rub off this easily. So this granular material protects this asphalt mat from ultraviolet rays. And if that is coming off very, very easily, you're looking at an older roof for sure. So a roof generally has a life expectancy of about 20 years, at least a roof like this. And there's some people in the marketplace, they'll say that, no, you should get 40 years out of a roof like this. Well, you know what? That's nonsense. And if you think that roof is warranted for 40 years, you get that warranty and let that transfer over. So if your seller's telling you that this roof is guaranteed for 40 years, get that warranty and see if that warranty will transfer over to you in a roof that is in this condition. I guarantee that there is no guarantee or warranty on this roof remaining. So always look for older roofs. Roofs are expensive to install. And it's an important piece of a home inspection is to determine the age or the life expectancy remaining of a roof. On this house here, we have a downspout that's missing and a downspout that's missing. So why is that important? That seems pretty simple and obvious and not a big deal, right? Well, it can be a very big deal because here, when these gutters drain during really heavy rain, or even moderate rain, that water is just going to sit right next to our foundation wall. So we have gallons and gallons of water coming off our steep pitched roof into the gutter system and ending up right here close to the exterior of this house. And then if we look here, what do we have? We have this planting area, right? We have a planting area here, gravel. The gravel may help for drainage a little bit, but all our water is going to end up, any water that ends up here, it's just going to go seep right down to the foundation. That is no good. I tell you the truth, I don't like these planting walls. When I see these, I really want you to remove them because we want to develop a nice positive pitch or grade away from the exterior foundation walls. So what happens here? The wind-driven rain comes here. We have the two downspouts that are missing, going to put water here, and the water's got nowhere to go other than to seep down right close to your foundation wall. How good is that? It's not good at all. So this is something that I don't like to see in a home. People like this, they don't really understand the problem that this kind of configuration causes, and it's a big problem. So if you end up keeping something like this and you want to put your plants, don't oversaturate this because we're so close to the foundation wall, and frankly, we have no ability to drain anywhere. Very, very important, guys. Always look for drainage problems on the outside of a house that you're thinking about buying. So here we have a chimney that's being improperly supported by a water heater. So this chimney right here is bearing right on or resting right on the edge of this water heater, and that's actually what is supporting this heating chimney right here. So obviously this is a problem. We don't want a water heater supporting a chimney. And secondly, how do we replace the water heater if it's supporting the chimney? So this has to be corrected. I just don't like this at all. This chimney has to have its own means of support and not rest on top of the water heater here. Now, a lot of times these chimneys here, we see this older cement here, this older cement chimney. And a lot of times this will contain an asbestos material here. Not really overly friable, so it's not super dangerous. But we have to let our client know that on occasion we do test this and we do find asbestos fibers in this type of cement material because it was used as a binder. And if we look down here, we have just this foil tape on the bottom of this chimney. So our exhaust gases come in here and we have just this foil tape, and this is hollow. There's no cover or cap under this chimney. So our exhaust gases could come in here, either go up or go down. And if this blows out, this foil tape, this is like HVAC tape, you seal up ductwork, you know, that's going to put all this carbon monoxide from the underside of this chimney in this house. So a few things that we're definitely going to have to address with this configuration right here, for sure. One of the things as home inspectors, we look at these attic pull-down ladders here, right? And so these are important to make sure these are safe because obviously we don't want anybody to get hurt. And one of the things we find often is one of these hinges right here, either the left one or the right one, gets bent. And then the hinge actually goes inward as opposed to outward. So that's one thing that you guys can look at when you're looking at these pull-down ladders. And we also want to make sure that we're properly secured where the attic access steps actually meets this opening right here. So the manufacturer indicates that these ladders have to be properly bolted here, not just used, drywall screws or thin fasteners, but there's a specific fastener and places to attach this framing right here, which is the attic pull down set of steps frame to actually its opening. So definitely look at that. And we also have to make sure that we're safe down here. And we notice that we have some splicing at the bottom. We're all wonky at the bottom. We don't sit correctly. You know, our hinges are slightly hyperextended. So this is an unsafe ladder. And we're gonna call this out as a safety hazard. And frankly, it really just should be replaced because we don't wanna mess with these ladders in terms of, you know, somebody getting really injured. And you can get very injured if this ladder gives way and fails. So this is something that's gonna go in the report as a safety hazard. Exterior of a house, wood siding, lot of paint peeling, a lot of missing paint. They waited a little bit too long to paint this house. So paint, guys, has a life expectancy on a home like this at about, around 6 or 7 years. So if your house looks like this, or you're buying a house that looks like this, you waited too long, or the seller, waited too long to paint this home. So for sure, right away, any areas of wood rot should be replaced, and then the home should be properly prepped with a nice primer and then 2 coats of exterior good quality paint applied, because the paint is actually the skin of the wall. I mean, that's going to really protect your wood siding, and wood siding can really be beautiful, but it does need proper maintenance. It's definitely not a maintenance-free situation. If you want a maintenance-free situation, then replace it to vinyl. I can't really get close to this factory-built fireplace here that somebody installed in the back of the garage, and this is actually in back of the family room in this house. And this space that we're in right here, but I can't even get into this garage, is the garage, and that's the back wall of the garage. There are so many things I don't like about this. Number one, it's not supported here, so we're basically on a wing and a prayer holding this fireplace up under here. There's no support under this fireplace at all. I don't know if you can actually see that. Secondly, this factory-built fireplace and chimney breaches the fire rating of this rear of the garage. You see these gaps here along this fireplace, and a fire can quickly spread from the garage to the living room or family room that's just beyond, this fireplace. So that's something that is significant. I think this fireplace, if I had to guess, and I think I'm guessing correctly, you won't find any permits for it. And also, you'll probably find that this is sort of a homeowner, a do-it-yourself project. And you don't really want to do-it-yourself project when it comes to fire building or installing fireplaces in your home. I also have concerns about the clearance to the combustible walls. I don't like that very much. And the clearance around this smoke pipe where it enters the chimney, where it enters the ceiling. Now, as a home inspector, I don't have the installation manual in front of me. I don't know what the manufacturer indicates. But what I can provide my customer is just some basic rule of thumb, common sense aspects of this install that I don't like. And you should, and I'm going to, obviously the client's inside, and we went through this already, but the clients should make sure that obtain the permits, that a closed permit for the installation of this fireplace, and also obtain the manufacturer's installation instructions to make sure that this fireplace meets them all. And I guarantee this is not going to do that. So be careful with these fireplaces. Look for amateur, non-professional work when you're buying a home with a factory-built fireplace, especially if that fireplace was installed subsequent to the building of the home. This was sort of an add-on fireplace. They wanted a fireplace in the family room, and here we go. It's right here. That's the back of the fireplace, and frankly, I don't like any of this. Patio, retaining wall, guardrail. This retaining wall is in failure, so you can see here along this edge, the rear edge of the patio, we have a lot of settlement, a lot of holes developing, like 4 holes here, where the soil pressure is pushing on this retaining wall. And as the soil pressure puts water pressure on this retaining wall, we're going to get this settlement right here. So that's going to continue to get worse over time. And we can see that wall is very bulged out. It's very leaning right here. So it's out of plumb. It's in actual, structural failure. So obviously that's something important. We really can't correct the issue with this patio unless we fortify and most likely replace this retaining wall along this back edge. And then we have this guardrail, kind of, and we have these wide openings. So definitely, obviously much wider than 4 inches. That doesn't meet modern standards for guardrail safety. And that's just a child safety hazard right through here. So we're going to have the client, make corrections there, as well. We have a couple of below ground discharge pipes here. So our downspouts actually end up going down this little ravine, which I like a lot actually. But this patio and this guardrail and also this retaining wall definitely need attention. Most likely that retaining wall is going to need replacement. Right side of the home. This is a set of steps and basically a walkway. Here we have a super steep drop off into the neighboring property down this ravine here. So this is actually a pretty significant child safety hazard. So I call this stuff out. I don't want any child to get hurt, or even adult for that matter, if they're unaware that that is a steep drop off, especially as we get to the front of the home. So maybe that we can put a rail or some kind of other barrier just to prevent, injury from possibly occurring in that, rare instance. But you don't want anybody to get hurt. So if you're buying a home like this that's built up, or sort of on a hillside, and you have young children, keep an eye on stuff like this, these child safety hazards. Look around. Where are those areas where children can possibly become injured? And that's going to help you in your buying decision, because you'll know that, hey, I have to do something with this retaining wall on the right side of this house if I'm going to have my children present.